Welcome to Creature Guide Live Daily News. For those of you that don't know, my name is Ethan. Today we're going to be going over a wide variety of different species of dinosaurs as well as mammals. So we will not be doing articles today, just doing a bit of a review on different species.
Oh, we were doing Ice Age.
No, I changed my mind. I think we're going to stick to slightly beforehand. Um, okay, so I guess let's bring up Nankus. So this is a species of Gomphothere from the Pliocene of Afro-Eurasia. So this animal would be dwelling in different parts of likely Tanzania, Ethiopia, as well as into different parts of southern Europe, so areas of Greece, and probably even into adjacent areas of like Azerbaijan or Armenia over in Western Asia. Despite how small it looks in this representation, the animal was probably somewhere around 7 to 8 feet tall and also probably weighed somewhere around 5 to 6 tons. So pushing somewhere around 2.6 meters in height. So the animal to the right of it would appear a little later in time, depending on when the Ananchus species was discovered, considering we do have a wide variety of different Ananchus species. I believe we've found somewhere between 5 to 7 different species of this Ananchus gomphothere. They're also quite closely related to the mastodons that would eventually evolve into the later Pliocene epoch, as well as the Pleistocene or the Ice Age. So, when it comes to the larger animals that it coexisted with towards its later range, or I guess you could say reign, especially like the large straight tusked elephants, the Paleoxodon. Those individuals could reach, in some cases, 16 to 18 feet in height or pushing somewhere around 5 meters. Whereas Ananchus stayed within the 8 foot range, which is around the height of different species of later elephants, like the different species of Mastodon, even certain earlier proboscidean species that lived um, earlier into the Pliocene epoch, as well as really the Miocene. So this animal, technically, also depending on species, probably evolved somewhere around 9.8 million years ago, which is towards the later period of the Miocene, with the Pliocene epoch starting somewhere around 5 to 6 million years ago and then mysteriously disappearing from the fossil records about 3 million years ago. So, right as the Pleistocene was hitting or the Ice Age. Judging by the dental structure of this species of proboscidean or early elephant, this animal is probably feeding on a wide variety of different species of trees. So, also feeding on different types of twigs, different species of seeds, and probably occasionally going after fruit. It was not like certain later lineages of elephants and even some other earlier species that, looking at their tooth structure, especially like the mammoths, were primarily grazers. So, animals like the later steppe mammoth, even the Paleoxodon, the straight tusked elephant, was likely feeding on a wide variety of really different species of grasses. Rarely, if ever, feeding on different types of leaves because their teeth were not designed to chew that specific type of a plant material. And also, this would mean that the mastodons and the gomphotheres would not be feeding on different species of grasses, even in times where they might have a bit of a harder time getting excess foliage from the different species of trees they naturally feed on. Their teeth simply aren't meant for chewing on grass, so in some cases, they probably would just simply starve. And the same case would be for probably like the mammoths later on into the end of the Ice Age or the Pleistocene. Though in some cases, not even like 12,000 years ago, which is what I'm referring to, it would differ on different species even earlier into the Pleistocene, and they would die off due to mysterious circumstances, but probably very likely um, certain types of grasses they naturally fed on disappeared, and then They simply starved. This individual, it almost looks like somebody took an Asian elephant and then gave it a sort of Gomphothere or mastodon sort of a physique and just massively um, elongated the tusks. Though you could say we have certain Asian elephants today that have had tusks, I think, exceeding like 7 to 8 feet in length or pushing somewhere around 2.3, 2.4 meters. Oh, I guess it's a herd on the other side. I wonder if this is supposed to be like a bull, and that's just a matriarchal herd of Anankus. And there's also some earlier species of horses that could be Hipparian.
They'll be
Now,
donkeys.
yeah, I mean, at this point, they would be probably around the size of certain smaller species of zebra and even the onagers or the close relatives of the donkey over in different parts of Iran, Uzbekistan. So these animals, however, unlike like when referring to the horses, unlike modern day horses, which have one specific toe, which is constructed as a hoof. Back then, they still had somewhere around 3 toes, depending on the species. They hung on to their 3 toes for tens of millions of years, considering you would have to travel back to certain parts of the early Eocene epoch, as well as the Paleocene epoch, to come into contact with different species of horses like Hyracotherium, Mesohippus, um, that would still have retained their fourth toe. It doesn't seem any species of horses had five. It would be slightly later, and then they would lose that third toe. And eventually, like once you hit the Ice Age or the Pleistocene epoch, all of the horses had simply one-toed hooves.
Did you see any of the others?
Like the monkeys
No.
or talking about the paintings? Oh, what about them?
When I put them up, did you actually see them?
Oh, yeah, I guess it was just pretty quick. So you could say in some cases, like many of these different species of gomphotheres and even like the later mastodons likely had smaller ears. I am not sure if we have evidence just looking at the skull structure. I mean, there probably is, indicating whether or not they were capable of growing larger ears, because it doesn't seem to be the case with many earlier species of proboscidean or elephants in general. It seems to be more of a modern trait with the different species over in Africa, just retaining or
Wait,
uh,
what are
re-
the ears for?
back then, I mean, outside of hearing and communicating, and these animals were not really using them for cooling themselves down, despite Africa not exactly being cool, especially sub-Saharan Africa. So areas like Tanzania, Nigeria, South Africa, still being quite warm or hot in some instances. But it did seem to be just cool enough until the very beginning of the Pleistocene epoch that you still had certain species of bear roaming the area. Really, so far, it just seems animals like the Agriotherium, which was about the size of a large Kodiak or one of the larger polar bear individuals of today. So pushing somewhere around 1,700 to 2,000 pounds, or maybe pushing around 800 to 900 kilograms. But that animal probably evolved somewhere around the end of the stages of this Ananchus gomphothere. So yeah, I mean, specifically when it comes to Ananchus, it was probably when it came to weight about as heavy as a large Asian elephant of today. However, it was a lot stockier and probably also more just overall heavily built and dense compared to Asian elephants. Asian elephants have a bit of a somewhat lanky sort of a physique to their overall structure. Also, these were not the four-tusked proboscideans that we you would bump into in different parts of the Pliocene and Miocene epochs. But yeah, these gomphotheres, for some reason, evolved this type of a stocky structure, and this seems to be the case with many species of proboscidean herbivores or the members of the elephant family that tend to be browsers for some reason. And then when it came to the grazers, many of them seem to have preferred having just an overall taller height. Elephants today are situated in the middle. So, I guess you could say when you look at African forest and African bush elephants, they're slightly more stocky in some instances than when compared to the Asian elephants. Despite, I'd say, all three species having a mixed diet, the African forest elephant seems to be much more of a browser, considering most of its habitat or native range is consisted within different Central African and certain West African forests. Not all of them being rainforest. Some of it is just simply like a woodland, sort of a thicket in the region. I think sometimes people tend to think of just Central Africa as being an entire rainforest. There's actually a wide variety of different ecosystems. But it's definitely not preferable for the larger bush elephants. When it comes to the tusks of this individual, I don't know precisely what's the longest set of tusks we have found of a Nankus. There have been a wide variety of different species of Miocene and Pliocene Gomphotherium that we have discovered with tusks over 8 feet in length. They're pushing about 2.6 meters. So, okay, I guess we can bring up a species of dinosaur now.
Oh, that's not what you put in the list next.
Oh, I mean, I guess we could go in order. Yeah, I guess we can bring up the Impolo. Okay, so this was much earlier over in um East Asia during the Eocene epoch. So you could even say it extends into the very beginning of the Oligocene. But this is quite a distant relative of today's rhinos or rhinocerodi in general. This is a member of the Brontotheridae lineage of parasodactyl mammals. So these creatures are more closely related to tapirs, horses, and modern day rhinos than they are to giraffes, elephants, people, bears, wolves.
Why does one picture of it look completely different than another?
This seems to be a more of like an earlier depiction, though it could be much more recent. I mean, it is a very good reconstruction of an Embolotherium. Though they're giving it, like, almost a tree trunk when it comes to the horn-like structure on the tip of its snout. Yeah, wow. Okay, that's a bit more recent. Um, at least I'm trying to think of what species there's not really a species of dinosaur, like, even when it comes to the horned dinosaurs, the ceratopsians, that you could compare this animal with. Um Like, definitely, like, not even the pachycephalosaurs. I guess you could say there were certain theropod dinosaurs that had, like, a small crest-like structure that you could somewhat compare, at least in just the overall shape, not its overall robustness or size, like Cryolophosaurus to an extent. But that's situated towards the very center of the back of its skull and likely just used for show. These animals also, when it comes to their horn-like structure towards the front, it is very possible they also didn't use it for combat. It seems to be that um, these structures were quite delicate, at least when being used in that way. It's not that
That looks
necessarily.
completely different.
Yeah, this is a bit of an older reconstruction. I think this is like possibly from the 1990s. It's from a certain book, but it definitely. I mean, I don't mind it. It still looks good for an Embolotherium. But this animal was not a carnivore. This animal was likely feeding on different species of leaves back in the Eocene epoch. Well, when I'm referring to Eocene, I'm referring to somewhere between 34 to 39 million years ago over in different parts of Mongolia and China. So it seems that at least the Embolotherium itself was restricted to those specific countries or that specific part of Asia. And at this point, different species of plants, especially like modern day grasses, still have yet to evolve. They probably, or at this point, they won't evolve, even when looking at the very end of the reign of Embolotherium until somewhere around 30 million years ago or 4 million years after this animal went extinct. This, I think, is possibly based off of like maybe some other depiction of a book or no,
That looks like a giant pig.
that's something else. Well, this is Andrew Sarkis, which is likely to have coexisted with Embolotherium, especially towards the later part of the Embolotherium's range, because we have also found Andrewsarchus over in Mongolia. Now, this animal would have a bit more of a sort of like a large pig sort of a physique to it, somewhat. Its skull structure was still vastly different than even certain earlier relatives of pigs.
I was referencing the Embolotherium.
Um, Wait, what were you saying that it looked like?
Said he looks like a pig.
Oh, yeah, they're very distantly related to pigs. Pigs are artiodactyls, so pigs are more closely related to wolves, bears, people, blue whales than they are to this animal. Now, the Andrewsarchus who is carrying the stillborn or just newborn calf, um, is actually more closely related to different species of whale as well as like people, bears, compared to the Embolotherium in this instance. And it was a bit of a mystery for a while. I think it was, well, specifically the family of mammals it's very closely related to are whales and as well as hippos. So, um,
Is this it?
yeah, this is a bit of an older reconstructions from the series Walking with Beasts. So, yeah, technically it has a bit too much of like a I guess like a wolf sort of an appearance to it. And it should be a bit more of like combined with the pig to an extent. Yeah, that's somewhat better. Um did add elongated canines. I'm not sure if if we found any Andrewsarchus individuals with that type of just an overall dental morphology.
There's one in a museum.
It's also, maybe we did. He just had very elongated canines for this. Well, also when you look at animals like hippos, they also have some of the largest canines compared to their skull structure of any predatory land mammals, at least during the Cenozoic era. Well, that would have been the only time that we have extraordinarily large land mammals, since beforehand, 30 to 40 pounds, you're pushing somewhere between 12 to 18 kilograms, which was really the max for mammalian size, considering they were constantly being hunted by the dinosaurs. Um, but yeah, this is a very well preserved specimen of like the upper jaw of an Andrewsarchus. I do think this was named after the paleontologist Roy Chapman Andrews, who led the expeditions into the Gobi Desert during World War I. Um, I mean, he also found a wide variety of other different species of like late Eocene epoch mammals and possibly also into the early Oligocene. That's also not including different species of dinosaurs he discovered as well. I think even Roy Chapman Andrews discovered certain species of modern day animals, possibly certain types of marsupials, but I could be mixing it up with certain studies he was doing on larger placental mammals over in parts of Asia, like even maybe like even certain parts of India, like something to do with rhinos, like the greater one horned rhino, or maybe elephants or tigers. But focusing on this, I think on the side it's not hitting me what specific group of odd carnivores that is. Well, okay, technically he's competing with one in the front too, because as you notice, they have very elongated frontal canines. Um, it's not hitting me who that specifically is. So I guess those are in Bolitherium in the background. Um, Also, when it comes to Andrew Sarkis, it's a bit of a debate, but he seems to possibly hold the title for being the largest carnivore to exist, except for an exceptionally large Arctotherium short-faced bear from the Ice Age of South America. So, when looking at Andrew Sarkis specifically, he probably weighed somewhere between 3 to 4,000 pounds, possibly in some cases, maybe even larger. So pushing at least 1.5 to 2 tons. Um. Oh wow, this is a much older, or at least I think it is, depiction of the Andrewsarchus. It's definitely giving him a bit of a just overall more narrow sort of a skull shape. But looking at the rest of his body, it almost like has a sort of an orc or a cow or even bison sort of a depiction to it, at least when looking at the core and the upper shoulder blades and even the muscles of the upper legs towards the back. Um, and constantly just reconstructing him feeding on younger Embolotherium, which is very likely, but he was probably omnivorous as well, so probably also just feeding on different species of fruit. And occasionally, especially during the calving season, for animals like Embolotherium, hunting them as well.
Is this, the same picture as the other one, just from a different angle? Oh, no, or was it? That's not it. No.
It's probably Ford. Oh, it could be. Seems that way. Yeah, I believe also this
Definitely
animal
different
was.
lighting, though, because that one looks one color and that one looks a completely different color.
Yeah, I think it's the same one. Also, looking in the at the
But
background.
this isn't in the other picture.
Well, yeah, maybe it is another one.
Lights are up, but there seem to be more in, like, hmm?
It's also hard to tell in the background, but I think that same darker coloration, like that orange area, which there is a bit of some sort of like orange accumulated painting um, towards the back of the other. But besides that, I mean, when this animal was going after, yeah, I think it's the same thing. Um,
Oh, I didn't even look at that.
see
Yeah,
that
his
darker
leg has even
coloration?
lifted. Yeah, that the same paw.
Yeah, it's him. When it comes to also in Bolitherium, so the herbivore, the Brontothere that this animal was occasionally hunting and probably really going after the juveniles, considering it does seem that Andrewsarchus also had quite a weak bite force compared to its body size, but even other animals in general or mammals specifically. So it doesn't really seem to have the ability to handle the pressure when biting onto a much larger animal, especially a Brontothere. So, that would have been extremely risky and could have possibly broken its jaw or its overall skull in that instance. Um, but when it comes to the Embolotherium, that animal, let's go back to like either when he's hunting it or, yeah, like specifically, especially the mother in this instance, but definitely even like with bulls could probably weigh somewhere around 7,000 pounds or possibly more. So pushing close to 4 tons or maybe, about 3,200 kilograms. Okay, so I guess let's travel forward in time. I mean, not forward in time, I guess back in time. Yeah, I guess it is interesting. I mean, you have it where different species of ceratopsians, the brontotheres, and then the rhinoceridai would evolve those horn-like structures for defense. And it doesn't seem to really be a characteristic that you see on any other lineages of animals for the most part, except like I said, with the certain species of theropod like Cryolophosaurus, but it was just used directly for show, or at least most likely. Um, okay, so I think we've traveled back to the early late Cretaceous about 98 million years ago over in Morocco. But it's very likely in this region, even though we also have found Spinosaurus in the area, was Sigillomosaurus. Now, Sigillomosaurus definitely was dwarfed by Spinosaurus, but this animal was only pushing somewhere around maybe 26 to 30 feet in length, or pushing around 8 to 9 meters, and was likely feeding on different species of fish in the region. It might have gone after any species of smaller guanodontids, as well as younger sauropods. But for the most part, this animal, like pretty much all the different species of spinosaurs, was focusing primarily on different species of fish.
Oh, wait, I have a blown up one of that. Why does it look like he's choking?
Um, yeah, that's a bit of an odd representation, but There were also different species of fish, like that's a small one that could reach well over 20 feet in length or pushing 6 meters, like the relatives of the sawtooth sharks of today that roamed the different floodplains and rivers of northern Africa at this point. So, Sigillomosaurus, however, also had relatively large forelimbs compared to its body size, even when looking at other species of spinosaurs in general, whether they're coming in from South America, Europe, certain areas of Asia, especially Southeast Asia. You had it where, like, the Spinosaurs during the early Cretaceous periods, which is when it seemed to, well, the whole family in general evolved. So pushing somewhere between 135 and 140 million years ago. And then mysteriously going extinct about 95, somewhere between 90 to 95 million years ago during the first 10 million years of the late Cretaceous. Northern Africa seems to be a major part of their domain. There's not a lot of evidence, or I'm not sure if there's any for them existing over in the different regions of what would be sub-Saharan Africa of today. So, different parts of Senegal, the Democratic Republic of the Congo, Tanzania. There were certain species of dinosaurs that we have discovered from like East Africa and Southern Africa, even a bit later into the Cretaceous. But at least with Spinosaurs, they never seem to have inhabited the region. Um, Yeah, there's not really a species of spinosaur that looks like this. When it comes to the overall elongated back vertebrae, which is what the spine would be, it would be much taller and also longer compared to its body size. Also, have a bit more of like a rectangular sort of an accumulation to it. Not. This is something that we would see in different sorts of like 1990s, 1980s, 1970s depictions. This is more of a Sigillomosaurus sort of a look. I think this looks a lot better. I still think that the skull structure has a bit too much of like a, not necessarily a Suchomimus, though it definitely edges towards that species. Um, Almost like a certain carnivore. It's not hitting me from Southeast Asia, but it could be Irritator to an extent as well. But I don't know. Irritator doesn't have that long of a skull structure, and it's a bit shorter. But when it comes to slightly, elongated or heightened back vertebrae, that is a very typical Sigillomosaurus. So this animal has been found in the Chemchem beds of Morocco, which is also where we even find, Spinosaurus in the area too. So you could have had it where Sigillomosaurus and Spinosaurus occasionally might have come into a confrontation with each other. They're both feeding on fish. They're likely occupying the same water sources, so it's just simply bound to occur. Also, this is very different from when looking at like a Spinosaurus skull. Spinosaurus skull, despite Spinosaurs in general being referred to as like the much more lightly built theropod dinosaurs, especially for their length. Even looking at their skull structures, and they're not meant for taking on like armored dinosaurs or much larger species compared to themselves. This is one of those instances where even like Spinosaurus aegypticus has a quite robust skull compared to different species of the Spinosaur lineage. This animal, the Sigillomosaurus, has a very thin and narrow jaw structure. It is still capable of likely taking on smaller dinosaurs, but as you can see, this is more of a fish eater, so or a piscivore. So likely just feeding on the medium to large size fish within the region. There doesn't seem to be a lot of evidence for the different species of spinosaurs going out to certain marine areas, at least to um, feed on different species of marine reptiles, but it certainly is possible. Also, I think we might have found certain species of Spinosaur specimens adjacent to marine deposits. But the question is just whether or not they were going out there to possibly not just hunt for saltwater fish, but even going after like plesiosaurs in the region. At that point, especially within the stage of the Cretaceous that we're at, pliosaurs in general, at least the large, short, long-skulled. um, carnivorous marine reptiles that used to dominate the Jurassic and early Cretaceous oceans have pretty much at this point gone extinct. The mosasaurs also haven't really evolved yet. So there's not much out in the ocean they really have to be concerned about. There might have been certain species of plesiosaurs that might have occupied a higher place in the food chain, but I believe at this point in the Mesozoic, it's a bit of a mystery as to who really is the top predator, um, at least of the different seas. So, yeah, when looking at Sigilomosaurus, if I didn't mention, I think this animal was probably pushing somewhere around 3 tons, maybe slightly larger. Let's see. Yeah, it's definitely a good reconstruction of the North African ecosystem. You've got like Rugops in the background, that little abelisaur. There have been a wide range of different species of pseudosuchians or crocodilomorphs from this era. And then you have it where there's a Carcharodontosaurus in the background, which we have also found from the Kemkem Formation of Morocco. Spinosaurus also has been discovered over in a formation over in Egypt, possibly Sigilomosaurus as well, but that's likely, at least I can't confirm that at the moment. Oh, I think we have found possibly Sigilomosaurus over in a certain formation in Niger. So it's more of in like the southern Sahara. Definitely, we have found Carcharodontosaurus also in Niger too. Let's see. In fact, yeah, when it comes to especially like those three specific countries, we have found a wide range of different early late Cretaceous fauna within the region, referring to just the overall different species of archosaurs or dinosaurs, crocodilomorphs, pterosaurs within these regions. Then there was some mysterious like pseudosuchian towards the side. It kind of resembled certain later species that would pop up in the Cretaceous. Okay. So this is from another part of the Mesozoic or pushing a little earlier in time and also a different part of the world. I have to say something though. Okay, actually, I'll mention that afterwards. This is when referring to the long necked sauropod, the Fuyangosaurus. So, this animal is from Thailand around 132 million years ago during the first probably 10 to 13 million years of the Cretaceous. And this animal was likely reaching somewhere around maybe 75 feet in length. They're pushing 25 meters. And
Adrian Rojo's in the chat.
well, good to see you, Therapod. So, um,
You need to call him a dragon.
oh, right. Um, Gronko, how are you doing? Careful with those rocks. It's what they eat and how to train your dragon. So, Fui Youngosaurus also is probably reaching somewhere around 30 tons. Also, probably grew just slightly larger. Though the thing that I'm looking at this depiction is a Tyrannosaur, which looks to be probably about the size of maybe a Daspletosaurus or a Tarbosaurus. You did have close to this point, but it would still probably be another 10 million years until the largest Proceratosaurids. So this is a lineage of earlier Tyrannosauroids, Proceratosauridai. Tyrannus over in China would evolve probably around 123 to 122 million years ago, but it did not coexist with Fulyangosaurus over in Thailand. Also, it just simply hasn't evolved yet. So the Tyrannosaurs at this point are very small, but what I mean by that is pushing still somewhere between 4 to 800 pounds, maybe. Um, yeah, that might be pushing it even with the 800 pound mark, or so somewhere between like 180 to maybe 370, 380 kilograms. So that's with like animals like Guanlong is probably around a 300 to 400 kilo, 300 to 400 pound mark, or pushing some around 130 to 180 kilograms. Okay, so when it comes to
Is that picture correct?
well, okay, well, definitely the Tyrannosaur shouldn't be here. Also, when it comes to the forest, and I see this in a wide range of, well, at least these types of depictions, but certain paleo artists, actually, I think there's a number that do make the forest to be out much larger compared to the dinosaurs, which would be accurate. The problem is, for some reason, there are certain other instances where the trees are depicted as slightly taller than the animals or just as tall. Um, And also, like, the tree trunks are very short in diameter or width, and you would have it where, in some cases, it would be like the different sequoias or redwoods over in California, extremely large, trees compared to even the long-necked sauropod dinosaurs in the region. Like, you had, many species of trees that these animals, especially when they were mature, at a certain age referring to the trees, they couldn't push over. So it'd be really like a lot of the either smaller species that these animals want to be foraging on or browsing if you're referring to like tree eaters, leaf eaters, um, or simply just younger tree individuals. Um, So let's see. Okay. So when it comes to Fuyangosaurus, it is possible it probably came into contact with certain earlier species of Spinosaur within the region, and maybe even certain Carcharodontosaurs. This is close. It might have been a bit later in time, but you had Spinosaurs like the Siamosaurus, which existed in the region.
What is
Um,
with the neck on this thing?
he might be one of those specific species of sauropoda, just overall the large lineage of long-necked sauropod dinosaurs that had quite a long neck compared to its body size, almost like the Mamenchosaurs. So, yeah, the Mamenchosaurs, it's even like when you're looking at different species of marine reptiles like the plesiosaurs, such as Elasmosaurus. But technically, that's probably not the best comparison considering they had a very um, I wouldn't necessarily say they had a short core compared to their body size, definitely when it came to their tail, but it's just such a difference in overall morphology. This is also a completely different lineage of, of animals in general. I mean, the sauropod is a terrestrial archosaur, whereas the marine reptile, the plesiosaurs and elasmosaurs are very advanced sauropterygians. So, yeah, in this instance, I mean, also what's nice to see is that he's rearing up in his hind legs and trying to reach whatever based what pines possibly. I'm not sure. I mean, it is very possible occasionally they might have been feeding on certain Cretaceous species of pines. I'm not too familiar with any at the moment,
Okay, this doesn't match.
but also you would have a bit of like a denser forest to an extent. I mean, that could just represent one of those more open woodland ecosystems. Yeah, I think I've seen this was for or like it's supposed to represent maybe a Sora Poseidon. The neck structure is not bad. I think it should be just pointing towards the sky and not really towards the ground. I think there were even certain dinosaur documentaries or certain animations that would reconstruct the sauropods walking in this crooked way. So, almost like they were consistently just depressed, which I could understand considering they're walking on grass,
And this guy I find funny.
which they would starve in that instance. Yeah, I think this is supposed to represent a new species that's been uncovered in the country recently. Um, but let's see. Unless I happen to come upon him, and this is actually the new species that popped up, but I thought he was found much earlier in time.
It said he was the same thing.
So yeah, it's probably the Siamosaurus Spinosaur in the background. I'm trying to think though, what could be that Carcharodontosaur? I'm guessing it's Carcharodontosaur in the distance. I'm not so sure about that crocodilomorph, or it's an Asian temnospondyl. But this is literally around that point when the temnospondyl amphibians went extinct. I mean, they did have a pretty successful reign, existing for somewhere around 200 and no, wait a second, not 200. Um, well, probably pushing somewhere around 200 million years, maybe slightly less. So they first existed during the Carboniferous period, so pushing over. 320 million years ago. Also, when it comes to like the head structure, if we have found the skull of Huyangosaurus, I think it's like something between a titanosaur and a chimerosauromorph to an extent, not really having a brachiosaur sort of a morphology. It's quite distinct from the brachiosaurs, at least looking at the head structure. The rest of the body does have a somewhat brachiosaur look to it, but the forelegs are not very long compared to the hind legs height. Though I would say that also when it comes to at least these different reconstructions of their hind legs, they're a bit more robustly built compared to their forelegs, which you could say is not necessarily surprising, especially when they're rearing up on their hind legs. You need very robust bones as well as just overall muscles to retain all of that weight. Uh, was he like heavily injured?
Oh, I just realized that.
Is that what it's supposed to be
Yep,
depicting? So, uh, he must have been under attack by some group of theropods, and
they left him alone?
yep, um, kind of like what happens to impala in some instances today over in sub-Saharan Africa. But this can also happen to deer, elk, um, moose. It can also occur to like even zebras, buffalo. So this would likely occur now and then during the early Cretaceous over in different parts of Asia, but you could even say just all of the Earth in general. Okay. Well, besides this, shocker. Um, hmm. Oh, so yes, it was an herbivore. It was not feeding on any other animals. Well, it's just that you have a wide variety of people that do assume, or they automatically think that pretty much all dinosaurs feed on meat, and you have to have your specific your food chain in general. But animals like the Foyungosaurus would have fed on a wide variety of different species of conifers. So also relatives of like the sequoias, the redwoods, certain pines, and I'm guessing probably having to intake somewhere around 1,500 to 2,000 pounds of food each day, or pushing maybe 700 to 900 kilograms. Also, it is very possible that these animals did have to make certain massive migrations during the wet and dry seasons. You would have had certain ecosystems that would not have had the extreme wet and dry season difference that you would see in like different parts of the Jurassic. But it would also vary on where and when you were roaming the Cretaceous period in general. So we have now traveled forward in time, and another individual has been captured. So I guess instead of like the Andrewsarchus with the Embolotherium calf in its mouth, this is a Titanoceratops. So an early relative of Triceratops existed in New Mexico during the Campanian stage of the Cretaceous around 75 million years ago, and it is carrying a crocodilomorph. Now, like a lot of different species of herbivores today, it is certainly possible during times when maybe the different species of ceratopsians, hadrosaurs at this point, ankylosaurs or nodosaurs, maybe even certain species of sauropods seems to be a bit harder to believe considering just their overall tooth structure, and I'm not sure how they would handle animal protein. But um, just when it comes to slicing it, and being able to swallow it, you might have had certain instances where ceratopsians were going to or had to actively hunt certain species of smaller animals. Bit of a mystery as to what that crocodile morph could be. But this is interesting. I mean, I guess when it comes to the hatchlings in general, it is showing them being covered in a very light accumulation of feathers.
Adrian Rojo just put in a list of Cretaceous species.
Oh, what's on there?
Um, Tyrannosaurus. Well, Tyrannosaurus is a. It's not an individual. Triceratops, Velociraptor, Spinosaurus, Giganotosaurus, Ankylosaurus, Parasaurolophus, Carnotaurus, Tyrannosaurus. They're all put together. You didn't space them out. Deinonychus, Argentinosaurus, Tronotus,
Yeah. Oh,
um,
yeah, it's a sauropod. It's valid.
Pachycep.
Pachycephalosaurus?
Mm, yeah, but that's a weird spacing. Baryonyx, Iguanodon, Gallimimus, Protoceratops, Utah raptor, Albertosaurus, Edmontosaurus. And then he says, I ran out of space.
So, are these dinosaurs bit later on that you would like discussed? Just I'm guessing that's possibly what it is, or are you just you're just showing your knowledge and would you like them discussed? That's the big question. Um, let's see. Yeah, because it's definitely
How
not.
is that?
Okay, for a Titanoceratops, it looks a little like certain earlier depictions of Triceratops horridus, but you can even say maybe even for younger Triceratops individuals. Um,
He said he's just nerding out.
oh, I mean, I mean, I'm definitely going to bring those guys up, and I'll go a bit more into depth. But okay, yeah, you did pretty well. So, especially for the Cretaceous, I think you neglected. It seems like you neglected the Triassic and Jurassic. It's like so far, it just seems like we're talking about the Cretaceous when it comes to the dinosaurs in general, which is true. Okay. Also, when it comes to the mammals in this instance, I would say what does look somewhat right is the overall like morphology of these small mammals. This would be a very Cretaceous or Jurassic sort of a look for different species of mammals in general. So many ancestors of today's marsupials and placentals roaming around. So marsupials referring to tree kangaroos, koalas, Tasmanian devils, possums, and then placentals referring to giraffes, bears, wolves, moose. So, but not Triceratops. That's much later. Titanoceratops had a bit of a much taller frill compared to its overall body size, and would even comparing it to many species of the Chasmosaur lineage of ceratopsians, which is the family of ceratopsians that Titanoceratops belongs to. It also possibly coexisted, or probably did, with different species of similar morphological um, like body structures like the different Pentaceratops species. It also likely came into contact with different types of hadrosaurs like Maiasaura at this point, since Maiasaura tends to pop up somewhere around 74 to 75 million years ago. Likely in some instances, even bumping into like different Parasaurolophus species, the Lambeosaurs,
Why is
and
his frill completely different?
yeah, it might be a little more realistic in this depiction, but I still think it would be a bit taller. Also, when it comes to the horn structures, I mean, they're not bad. I'd say they're pretty close to what a Titanoceratops would look like. There's something a bit off about his core in this instance, though. Like, it's almost as if it's a bit too short. Things that you tend to notice about animals like the different Pentaceratops species or even Titanoceratops is that their core has a bit of like a heightened sort of a gait to it, at least when looking at certain back vertebrae. You could say you see similar instances with the Pachyrhinosaurs and like different members of the Centrosaur lineage, but it's different. Centrosaurs, especially when looking at Pachyrhinosaurs, are much wider. for some interesting reason. Um, no, it's a bit mysterious. I mean, I'm guessing maybe it's just simply due to the very complicated vegetation, at least for the time that they're having to digest. And that's why they had wider rib cages. It tends to be more of an herbivorous sort of a characteristic. And the chasmosaurs, they still would have had a relatively wide um, rib cage, especially as you head to like triceratops. But at this point, with animals like the Pentaceratops species, Titanoceratops, they have a bit more of like a slim sort of an appearance or a physique in general, at least compared to these other ceratopsians. This is definitely much closer to the sort of frill structure that I was thinking of for Titanoceratops. And it does, especially when you're looking at the bottom part of the skull in general. It does have a somewhat similarity to Triceratops in some instances, but it is much more narrow, and, it doesn't have, like, a bit of a the term's not bloatedness, it's just I think Triceratops has, like, a somewhat, more of, like, an ovalish or somewhat, um, just wider skull structure compared to Titanoceratops. Yeah, you can see the similarity, especially on the bottom part of the skull. Um Oh, yeah, that's another thing. When did it show it on that other, drawing, though? No, it didn't. When if that's the right skull for, Titanoceratops, it's showing a bit of a, depression within the horn structure right in the middle. Oh, might have to double check on that, but this is
No, it says
possibly
Titanoceratops ancestor.
Oh, okay, I wonder
Well, then with a question mark, so
Oh, okay, so we don't know. Well, this is definitely like some Chasmosaur, so it could be a Pentaceratops species or it's some mysterious individual before Titanoceratops, but it's definitely not far off. I mean, on this individual, it obviously has like smaller horns, also a bit curved downwards towards the ground.
what is this?
Um, is that Loki ceratops, I think? Like one of the more recently discovered species of ceratopsians. It existed, however, over in Montana.
It says Titanosaur.
Yeah, that is not him. Um, I would say the overall reconstruction of these animals do not look bad, but I think the one in the background has extremely fat legs. Like he does not have ankles. They have been consumed by his calf. And he has kind of fat feet in general. You could say the ceratopsians, many of them did have somewhat wide or um, somewhat fat feet. I mean, you would have a bit of a layer of fat on the bottom of their feet to help absorb the pressure when they're walking on the ground. That's why dinosaurs did not stop. You would
They're
not hear
fat-footed.
like the long necked sauropods, like the titanosaurs, or the brachiosaurs, the diplodocids stomping. They could sneak up on you if they wanted to, or um, like even the different species of theropods, anybody. I would say like zebras, horses today, depending on what type of ground they're walking on, are much louder compared to um, the different species of dinosaurs they used to roam. Actually, certain birds in general today can be quite loud. So that is interesting. It almost makes sense too. For these much larger animals, you don't want the whole Earth, or they themselves don't want the Earth consistently moving and I guess constantly feeling like an earthquake. You couldn't function even if most of what you did was just simply eat like different species of ferns. That would be completely unstable of a of an earth. So when it comes to I'm not sure if this is Loki Ceratops because I'm looking at the front of the skull structure. I'm pretty sure Loki Ceratops had a nasal horn. That is a very centrosaur sort of an appearance. It's not something that you find on different species of Chasmosaur. So I might have mistook it, but it has very similar Lokiceratops sort of um, morphological features, especially the horns towards the side of the upper frill. The horns also facing towards the side somewhat, but also Lokiceratops are a bit more curved. This is also a bit of a mystery. I'd like to find that out. But also, when it comes to these Titanoceratops, yeah, I think these two depictions are just a little too Triceratops horridus like. Not Prorsus. This is not a bad. I actually think this is a good reconstruction, despite not seeing the entire frill. I'm assuming it's going to be a lot taller, considering if you're looking at something like a Triceratops, it doesn't exactly have a short frill, but it's going to be very much protecting or concealing its neck. The earlier chasmosaurs, like the Pentaceratops species and Titanoceratops, really focused on putting a lot of height into their frills. Also, the specific, like large holes, there are these two large holes within their frills, would have contained a very dense layer of tissue. Like, it might have been, a somewhat sort of a battle to an extent for even different species of tyrannosaurs to pierce through, but that probably would be towards just the bony part of their frills, not necessarily tissue themselves. Okay, so we have some mysterious iguanodontid possibly fighting off a Spinosaur. I mean, the models are okay when it comes to reconstructing the animals in general.
It says it's Shantangosaurus.
Oh, we traveled, okay, to another part of the, Cretaceous and another part of the world, not too far from when, the Titanoceratops was existing, but Spinosaurus and even Spinosaurus itself, Shantungosaurus, did not come into contact with each other. However, what this could be trying to depict is just how massive the Shantungosaurus was. This is one of the largest species of East Asian ornithopod to exist, or hadrosaur in general. This is a member, I believe, of the um, maybe it's possibly the Lambeosaur lineage of hadrosaurs, and this animal could reach a length of somewhere between 45 to 50 feet, possibly longer, or pushing some around 14 to maybe 16 meters, and probably weighed pushing somewhere between 15 to 20 tons. It was a massive, species of hadrosaurs. Like, even the tyrannosaurs, if we have evidence for any specific ones really occurring at the specific time of, and location, because this animal is from China, of Shantungosaurus, even preying on the larger individuals. So this animal did dwarf, um, in many cases, pretty much any species of theropod dinosaur to exist. Now, the problem is it's not an armored species of herbivore, or it's not necessarily having like the large size and also just simply like the massive usable tails, as well as being able to like rear up in its hind legs and smush a theropod. Well, a larger one. It could easily smush like a species of dromaeosaur.
Is he looking at him saying move?
Well, he also looks a bit injured. Like, is he dead? Like, did this mysterious species of dromaeosaur take like a chunk of meat
Oh,
off of the crocodilomorph and just leave?
right here.
So he has the question: is he alive? I
So
don't.
so the other one's saying wake up?
It seems that way. There's also something very odd with his overall beak structure, especially when looking at like the bottom jaw. The front part of the snout on the upper jaw seems good. It's also, like, facing towards the ground with all of them. Hmm. I guess that would make sense if you're going for a specific type of a, morphology. Oh, yeah, there's a bird. Yeah, this is a bit better. When it comes to the hadrosaurs in general, this animal definitely has quite a similarity to, like, the Montosaurus species over in North America. So we have, like, Montosaurus annectens, Montosaurus regalis. Gallus existed a bit earlier. So this is somewhere around, I believe, 70 to 75 million years ago over in China. So I'm wondering what's trying
Is
to
it
refer
saying one is
to.
a female, one's a male?
Maybe. I think it's still a bit of a guess. It's just possible with dimorphism occurring within the males and the females. We just don't really have any evidence for knowing who is who.
Oh, wait. Hold on.
They did extend the lip though, this animal.
This guy needs to stop eating.
What is well, hmm, yeah, that is a very odd sort of a skull structure for a Shantungosaurus, and he's a bit wide too. They gave him, yeah, a very robust neck, but there's also just are these supposed to be like zombies or like the walking
Walking
dead dinosaurs?
I don't know.
Like, are those flies around them too?
I didn't even think about that.
Yeah, there's something very off about this. Some Tyrannosaur, I don't think it's Tarbosaurus in the background. Okay, I think this is like from Path of Titans. Yeah, the Shintongosaurus, I think it had a bit of a somewhat difference in overall like stature and the physique change to it compared to the Edmontosaurus or the Barsboldia, which even the Barsboldia is quite distinct when it comes to its morphology. Barsboldia, though, might be a bit more elongated towards the back vertebrae. Shantungosaurus also, I believe, did have a somewhat elongated back vertebrae as well, but I don't think it was as much as Barsboldia. I might have to double check. But both of these animals, I mean, even when you're looking at the Edmontosaurs, the Lambeosaurs of North America during the late Cretaceous, all these animals were feeding on a wide range of different species of flowers, ferns, possibly shorter conifers, and definitely going after different species of shrubs. Seeds don't really come into conversation when it comes to the different species of hadrosaurs, iguanodontids in general, when it comes to talking about their diet. This looks like one of those reconstructions, maybe from like the 1980s. I don't think this is supposed to be a Shantungosaurus. In fact, it seems to be like an earlier iguanodontid. I think I see a thumb spike. Hadrosaurs did not have thumbs. Like they were virtually thumbless. So it is quite odd. Shantungosaurus was one of those hadrosaurs when it comes to just overall lacking in defense. Decided to somewhat do the smart thing, at least when there's plentiful vegetation available. The ecosystem's not changing, and it just massively increased in size, which for a hadrosaur is a very wise decision. Most of the others stayed in that size range where they were pretty much vulnerable to attack, especially by the larger theropods in the region, especially the different tyrannosaurs, and the younger ones probably being prey to the smaller dromaeosaurs. Yeah, in this case, it might be representing some relative of Velociraptor in this instance, walking amongst the shadows of these giants. Considering Shantungosaurus is probably at least 16 feet in height, possibly taller, or pushing somewhere around maybe 4.8 meters. It's probably the tallest species of hadrosaur to exist. Yeah, he's got an issue. But that's also probably well, okay, let's say Tarbosaurus and Shintungosaurus coexisted with each other. Tarbosaurus is really maxing it out, pushing, 7 tons. Usually it's around like maybe the 5 to 6 ton range. It still had a length of probably pushing somewhere around 36 to 38 feet or 11 to 11.8 meters. The Shantungosaurus still dwarfs it when it comes to length, height, weight, and, also, this is what's supposed to maybe, depict a bull Shantungosaurus. Um, no, it is very likely that they roamed in different herds. Whether or not, like, it was a matriarchal or, possibly a patriarchal society, it does seem to be with, like, different species of even the sauropod is still a bit of a mystery, but you could have had it where the bulls, in this case with Shantungosaurus, and even other different species of hadrosaurs or the ceratopsians, were creating their own, just small bachelor herds.
Okay, I don't know if some of these are accurate.
Yeah, that's actually not a bad depiction. So this is slightly earlier into the Cretaceous. This is around 76 million years ago over in Alberta, Canada. Now, possibly this animal even existed over up into Alaska, but this is Chasmosaurus rusi, and this specific species of ceratopsian likely, okay. What differs it and the other species of Chasmosaurus? There's also another name for this animal. It's not hitting me. It's actually not even like it is referred to as Chasmosaurus rusi, but there's also another genus name.
Adrian Rose says, "Tarbosaurus is my favorite Tyrannosaurid."
Well, I mean yeah, I mean that's really great. I mean, he was definitely, the top predator of late Cretaceous Mongolia 71 million years ago. So definitely Velociraptor didn't touch him. At least as long as it wasn't a hatchling, because they were definitely capable of going after hatchling tarbosaurs, even until they probably reached 400 pounds or pushing like 120 to maybe 180 kilograms. I was basing it off of like velociraptors, and not we have evidence of velociraptor going after protoceratops, which could reach probably 300 to 350 pounds, pushing around like 150 kilograms. But yeah, tarbosaurus is great. Like I even think the Chase by Dinosaurs model looks really good too. Might be a bit on like the thin side to an extent, but overall, he was pretty good with Nigel Marvin. But also when referring to this Chasmosaurus species, it has what differs it from the other. It has a very wide frill compared to many species of Chasmosaurs in general. This might be of the other one. It's just not hitting me the specific species name, but the other Chasmosaurus has a much taller sort of a frame or a frill for its body size. They also, like many species of earlier Chasmosaurs, have that distinct those two holes on each side, which is odd in general. Why did the ceratopsian, especially these specific Chasmosaurs, evolve this type of a frill structure? Like, really, what's the benefit? Um, Considering you already had Centrosaurs at this point that have evolved frills that do not have this structure. Maybe something about the tissue in the middle. I don't know.
Okay, I like this.
Chasmosaurus, regardless of the species, is also renowned for having rather short horns compared to many other ceratopsians. They were also some of the earliest too. Okay, so yeah, this is definitely a very um odd depiction when it comes to the horns. I'm not sure what exactly to say about those eye socket horns. I think they're a bit um sky pointing, and I think in some cases maybe even a bit thin, but it is logical to make the horns thinner as you reach the end. I think the nasal horn in this case is probably fine. The rest of the Chasmosaur definitely looks good. Are we able to see like the top of it? Oh, or is that it? Oh. Well, this could be Chasmosaurus russi. It is hard to tell because the paleo artist has it slightly turning its head. But the hands look good. Yeah, those aren't clawed, fingers. I was looking to see all of the toes were clawed, but it's just the thumb, the index, and the middle finger, which is good. The other 2 are shorter. Yeah, overall, when it comes to the core structure of the Chasmosaur, it has a slightly wide sort of a rib cage to it. The tail structure looks very Chasmosaurus in appearance.
This just says Chasmosaurus.
I'm wondering about the beak, though. Oh, yeah, this also looks good. Yeah, I mean, it definitely is a very, somewhat Albertan Cretaceous landscape. Definitely, I like how they gave it a fern prairie because we have evidence in many, time periods of the Mesozoic era or the time of the dinosaurs when fern prairies in some areas would have dominated the landscape. So instead of like the grassland prairies of today, it would have been covered in ferns. So definitely, a lush area for these chasmosaurs to obtain much of their nutrients and minerals, chemical compounds. and then it's probably the rut in the back. Oh, okay. So here, he decided to go for a bit of a hike because the Rocky Mountains they were just emerging at this point. So technically, these mountainous regions probably wouldn't have occurred or just existed in general. It was quite flat during the Mesozoic. Um, like even mountain ranges like the Brooks Range over in Alaska. But yeah, so this probably would not have occurred. But when looking at the Chasmosaurus russi itself, it is a pretty good reconstruction. They even added like feathers towards the back of the tail, which has been um, shown in many depictions of like smaller Chasmosaurs. What I mean by small, however, is that this animal was still around 18 to 20 feet in length, pushing like 5.3 to 6 meters, and probably weighed somewhere around 1.5 tons.
Okay, this
Skull
guy
structure
looks
looks good too.
lonely.
Um, yeah, I guess, he does. It could be, trying to just depict maybe a lone bull. He has also very long horns compared to his body size, which, I mean, it still looks good overall. And it is very possible that chasmosaurs probably had much longer horns compared to what we find in some instances when it comes to the fossils. So overall, it's a good looking chasmosaur. I like how they have smaller Cretaceous birds surrounding him, considering you would have had a wide range of different species of Cretaceous birds at this point,
And this
some of
guy
them
just
being very toothed.
this guy just wanted his picture taken.
Yeah. Um, there is something a bit off with this guy if it's supposed to refer to any of the species of Chasmosaurus. There's just something a little too mixed when it comes to like combining him or looking at a Triceratops. Um, Even maybe like Pentaceratops to an extent. This is not really a Chasmosaurus sort of a look. The frill, you could say, is very Chasmosaurus like, but when looking at the horns, like the skull structure, at least from this view, there's something off about it.
Oh,
Now, is that an actual model?
I don't know.
As if it is, I mean, it's not a bad model. I mean, I do like the overall like skin texture. There's another word, but if it's something else, yeah, it has issues.
Okay, here's your favorite.
Um, Yeah, these guys. There was a certain other species of Chasmosaur in general, or Chasmosauridae, that did have this type of a horn-like structure. Like really, just putting a lot of its emphasis into like the nasal horn or the nose horn, and barely like even protruding eye socket horns, which is odd. The frill in many cases was very similar to Chasmosaurus. This specific species is not hitting me, but for Chasmosaurus itself, no, this is not how they would look. Maybe earlier in life, we'll say the overall ecosystem in general they're walking through, and also showing the young in the middle looks very. It's possibly quite realistic. Okay, so this seems to be a bit of an older reconstruction, maybe from the 1990s or 1980s. Though it says 2019. Yeah, it certainly is possible. There's definitely bit of definition that has been added to these specific individuals of these Chasmosaurus. Also gave it a very wide frill, but also like a bit of a gap in between those elongated side horns and then specifically the frill. Also giving it very short eye socket horns too, which would match the different specimens we have found of like Chasmosaurus russi. This was definitely not an uncommon mammal during the late Cretaceous of Alberta, Canada, at least 75 million years ago. There have been a wide range of different specimens of Chasmosaurus that have been discovered. I think sometimes like the centrosaurs, such as different Pachyrhinosaur species, tend to sometimes overtake the Chasmosaurus when it comes to the number of specimens, but this animal wasn't exactly rare. But yeah, I mean, I think the tail and like especially on the individual towards the front might be a bit skinny. The other one though, it seems fine. Now looking at the forelegs and the hind limbs, this animal is going to have shorter forelegs compared to its hind limbs, which is a common ceratopsian trait in general. Whether you're looking at the centrosaurs or the chasmosaurs, but tends to be more of like a distinct chasmosaur trait. At least it's a bit more emphasized. Also, their beak structures are different compared to like when you're looking at um, any of the different species of ceratopsians in general. They do have very distinct beaks. Like even when you're looking at earlier species back in the early Cretaceous, so over 110 million years ago, the late Jurassic, their beaks are very distinct, but also at that point they didn't have any horns. Well, for the most part, like they didn't have any eye socket or nasal horns. They might have had occasionally side horns, but earlier in their evolution, it was non-existent. They did not have a frill. And yes, this animal likely did have to experience different winter blizzards during the late Cretaceous, at least at this point. A major cold front over in North America and different parts of Eurasia, and even Antarctica.
Okay, is this any good?
Oh, okay. Eustreptospondylus. So we're back over in England, like around 165 million years ago. Um, no, it still has quite a bit of an issue, like especially with its skull structure. It looks too allosaurid like when looking at specifically Allosaurus, which wouldn't really appear for another maybe 12 million years and over in different technically different parts of Europe, but also North America, Africa. This is better. They did elongate his skull a lot more. I believe Eustreptospondylus is a member of the megalosaurid family of theropod dinosaurs. Now it is very realistic that this animal would probably have been occasionally um, patrolling the shores of England during the mid Jurassic and looking for any beached ichthyosaurs, plesiosaurs, maybe even pliosaurs in some instances. Maybe it decided to go after some calamari and munch on some of the cephalopods or
And it doesn't
squids.
even have to salt its food.
Yeah, that's another thing. Oh yeah, that was hitting me. How would that taste? Though I would assume he'd be smart enough to pull it further back onto the shore. Also, okay, a problem is not necessarily with him, but there's not really any evidence for Eustreptospondylus having those horn-like structures. Um, those pterosaurs, it look like a species of pteranodonted. Pteranodontids have not evolved yet at this point in the Jurassic. They will not appear until maybe around 140 million years ago during the beginning, the first few million years of the Cretaceous. This Eustreptospondylus, I mean, is iconic for its appearance over in Walking with Dinosaurs, but it's not. This is quite far off from the actual creature. It would have had a much more like elongated and narrow jaw structure. The overall physique of Eustreptospondylus is quite um, gracile compared to this individual. Though I guess you could say he wasn't necessarily too robustly built. Definitely when it came to his skull.
I like him.
Oh yeah, here we go. So yeah, this is probably depicting okay, it's a somewhat like similarity to the beginning of like the Cruel Sea episode in Walking with Dinosaurs, and the Liopleurodon takes the Eustreptospondylus, which is possible with a younger Eustreptospondylus individual, and when comparing it to maybe an adult Liopleurodon.
Well, somebody actually painted it.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, this instance. Okay. They did coexist with each other, but Liopleurodon, compared to a full-grown Eustreptospondylus, was not this big. Predator X, or the later Pliosaur species, later into the Jurassic, about 150 million years ago, also patrolled the shores of England, Germany, Switzerland.
Here's the
Like
actual picture.
was probably yeah, comparable in size. But yeah, Liopleurodon in reality was about maybe 28 to 30 feet in length. They're pushing like 8 to 9 meters. But um but these are really good reconstructions though. I mean, even the Liopleurodon Eustreptospondylus from Walking with Dinosaurs is great. Just when it comes to their own distinct models. Though Liopleurodon from Walking with Dinosaurs is in some cases quite realistic. Maybe something off about the teeth or maybe where the nostrils were placed, but besides that, it's pretty good. Um, yeah, I think this is a really good, painting of that instance. But likely, Liopleurodon is just focusing on different species of ammonites. Maybe it's going after certain plesiosaur individuals and, going after different species of fish, and maybe younger ichthyosaurs. It certainly is, likely. This is a good reconstruction of the Eustreptospondylus on the shore. I mean, these animals were not much more than maybe 14 to 16 feet in length, or pushing some around 4.2 to 4.9 meters, and probably didn't weigh much more than maybe 1,400 pounds. Probably be a large Eustreptospondylus, or pushing about 650 kilograms. This animal would not pop up onto the scene until maybe the early Cretaceous. Wait a second. I'm not sure if I know who this is. It seems like maybe a newer species that was discovered. I don't think it's Baryonyx. This is a bit of like a fat sort of a Baryonyx. It did definitely add lips to this Baryonyx individual. Um, yeah, I don't really know who this is, and this would be like the early Cretaceous, maybe 130 million years ago, possibly in England or certain other parts of Europe, like Germany.
Okay, am I right here?
That is a Eustreptospondylus. Both the Spinosaurs, like that Baryonychid, and the Eustreptospondylus were members of the Megalosauroideae lineage of theropods. But Eustreptospondylus, first of all, evolved much earlier, before the first Spinosaurus popped up on the scene, and was a lot smaller in many instances. Okay, so I don't know who that Archosaur is in the background, or at least in the front. The Rhamphorhynchids, though, catching like fish or smaller cephalopods around him is very realistic. They were thriving at this point in the Jurassic. Okay, so we're going to give everybody a minute to put any questions about prehistoric to current animals in the chat.
Adrian Rojo said, "Are dinosaurs able to drive cars?"
Well, I'm trying to think of specific types of like basal, vehicles that maybe you only have to step on it. Um, Also, specifically, like how the wheel is constructed. I think, teaching it from a certain young age, it doesn't have to deal with, maybe using a stick or, okay, maybe it's like a base automatic. I think maybe in some instances, I'm trying to also think of a theropod, or I'm not sure if I would risk it with the herbivores. Also because of their base sort of just hand morphology, or arm morphology as well. Or I guess what I'm trying to say is their biomechanics. Um, hmm. I think it could be possible maybe with certain megaraptorids. If it's just sort of like a basic sort of like a I'm trying to think of one of those, vehicles like you'd
Like a
find in, like, a
Kubota?
toy store or something. Um,
Where you don't have to put your foot on the brake, it just comes to a stop.
oh, yeah, or something like a Kubota or certain John Deere, or like a Kowalski. I mean, that's certainly possible. I think it is. I think it's just really also making sure their claws don't damage the whole thing. Now, yeah, it doesn't have to step on the brake. I'm trying to think of something else. Oh, you know what a problem is? That might take it away. Is reversing. That the dinosaurs might have a bit of an issue with. I'm not sure. I mean, I guess you could possibly um, manage that, but
How do they turn on the key?
oh yeah, that's another thing.
It'd have to be a push button.
Well, yeah, I guess I'm trying to make it as like basic as possible, or just simple. Like just push the button. If it really is a push a button or sort of a locomotive, I think it possibly, um, yeah, certainly is likely. They definitely can't fill it up with any um, fuel. However, if it's like a Back to the Future vehicle, so maybe the DeLorean from like the second movie, and all it has to do is take maybe like bits of old fruit or like certain bits of cardboard and put it in as fuel. I think that's what they used. Um, no, I would think that might be too much.
You gotta ask, what's the purpose of the sail on the Spinosaurus?
It likely was used for, like, attracting mates during the breeding season and warding off other males. There have been certain theories as to the Spinosaurs, especially, like, the specific species that had much, um, more elongated back vertebrae compared to, like, the Baryonychids, even animals like Irritator, or Sigillomosaurus, because Sigillomosaurus had pretty short sail. Suchomimus, that they might have used it in certain parts of the day to help create shade for fish, and they would simply, like, stay still for a short period of time, and the fish would just congregate in that specific area. Um, it was an older theory as to possibly, using the sail as, like, a heating or cooling advice. Now not advice, device. I'm trying to think of what animal somewhat uses a similar, um would use that type of a mechanism, but is also warm-blooded like the Spinosaurs, but I can't think of any, at least at the moment. Um Oh, what I'm thinking of is you have certain species of birds today that will many, that will, sunbathe. So they will kind of, extend one of their wings to the side and also kind of lay sideways to I think they're trying to gain some warmth, but I think there's also something else going on, because they will do it sometimes in very hot circumstances, but usually it's when they feel extremely comfortable too. So and I'm not talking about like a very, um just ugly sort of an area. I mean, like it's, there's plentiful vegetation around or grass, and they just feel comfortable and they do that sort of an instance. But that's not the same as some animals simply just laying or standing up. So it's very possible it didn't need it for heating or cooling itself. It possibly just went to the water, especially during early late Cretaceous North Africa, to cool down, like many species of dinosaurs in general. Okay. So, thanks for joining, and also, I guess, see you later, Gronkle, and the Archosaur that just asked the other question. And from Prehistoric to Present, my name is Ethan. This is Creature Guide Live Daily News. Let's see. Happy International You Strapped to Spinalist Day, and remember that nothing is better than all animals all the time.